Welcome to the Ashes into Beauty podcast with your host, Stephanie Marie Laswell, divorce concierge at The Divorce Life. Hello, listeners. Thank you for tuning in today. This is your host, Stephanie, and I have my beautiful guest, Lakresha, here with me today. Hi, Lakresha. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Yes, I'm glad we finally got this on the calendar. We've had to reschedule a couple of times.
Yes, but that's okay. All in
Yes.
perfect timing, right?
Absolutely. So why don't we just dive right in and go ahead and tell me, what do you feel like the ashes were from your divorce?
Wow. It was I think probably the greater part of it was feeling like I failed. I was excited for marriage. I was excited for feeling we're going to this new level of our relationship. And so to get to this part where it was ending, it just felt like a big failure. Nobody wants to fail, right?
Right.
So it was the ashes part would be more than anything, the feelings and the emotions that were, internal and external, but that I really had to do a lot of work in, even, afterwards, even now still, just working through just the parts of it that were very hard, the parts that didn't seem so clear or understanding. But now that I'm kind of, coming on through those things, I can see the beauty in the ashes, see the beauties in the parts that hurt and the emotional part, and even that feeling of failure to know I didn't necessarily fail,
Yeah, absolutely. Do you feel like you had to go through a forgiveness process with that failure piece?
Yes, that was a big part of it. And we all hear the lines, forgiveness is for yourself. And it took me a while to really get into the understanding of that. Forgiveness is such a big healing part of any situation, honestly. And it really is for yourself. So, while working through the different parts of the separation and the divorce, when I got to that forgiveness part, there was a struggle. And then when I really started diving in deep and getting into the intricate parts of forgiveness, it was the major key player that allowed me to see the whole process differently.
Right. Yeah. I think for me, that took the longest was that forgiveness to myself, not necessarily the other party. But I've been divorced twice. So in both situations, it was releasing myself from that sense of failure and really allowing myself to say, I forgive you and you're not a failure. And you don't have to show up and be perfect in every situation. So that was definitely the longest part of my healing journey too. What else did you find that was very helpful for you in your healing of your divorce?
I really began to, I've always been in scripture, but I really began to dig deep. And not anything like particular, but just the various stories that were there in scripture. One of them was like with David and his situation where he conceived with Bathsheba and the child ended up dying, and the way that he mourned, he laid out on the ground and cried and mourned in the ground, and then got himself up and continued on doing with what he needed to do. And in that, asking forgiveness, from God. And so there were just different stories that really, popped out to me that I would just dive into, read more, learn who I was even reading about. And then, of course, you have your close friends that,
Yeah.
um, even in times like this where, for them, it might be hard kind of seeing this whole
Mhm.
process,
Mhm.
or, they may not know exactly what to say, or
Mhm.
what to do,
Mhm.
just to kind of help you cope and handle. But
Mhm.
just sometimes getting to be in their presence. And so, yet they may not say a word, I may not say a word, but we're just together, just to not feel alone.
Mhm.
And then I have a kiddo that was
Mhm.
still such a great motivation,
Mhm.
um, that allowed me to keep taking steps forward, um, just to see both of us, still thrive, still be okay,
Mhm.
still do for her in ways, reinvent this new life for us together,
Mhm.
and being excited about it, after
Yeah.
coming through some things, being excited about what her and I could do together from
Mhm.
time to time, and just experience. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. I hear 3 very powerful things that I work with my clients on, and that is,
Hmm.
going back and knowing yourself and knowing what your beliefs and your values are, which I feel like you probably gathered
Hmm.
that from your scripture, like, that was your center, right? That got you centered back on what was
Right.
most important to you, and, then having that tribe that is around you, that is a huge part, I believe, of the healing process, no matter what we're going through.
Yes.
And, a lot of times I feel like our tribes don't know how to show up for us. They have the best intentions
Right.
and they want the best for us, but sometimes if they haven't been there before, but every divorce situation is so different and needs to be handled
Hmm.
differently. Like there's so many different dynamics that you're going through that it really is an individual
Yeah.
approach. But it's huge to have that tribe come around you and embrace you and just be. And I really
Yes.
encourage family and friends that are wanting to support their friend that's going through a divorcee just to be present and try to keep
Hmm.
things as normal as possible without giving a lot of focus on the big elephant that's in the room, right? Like, because sometimes
Right.
we want a break from that, and we just want things to be
Hmm.
back to normal. So if our friends can provide that for us, that is like the best gift they can give, right?
Yes. Absolutely. Yes,
Yeah,
I agree.
yeah. So now that you've gone through some of this healing process, like, what do you feel like the beauty is that's come out of that? You mentioned that a little bit with your daughter and just kind of recreating what does family look like and making peace with what family looks like now, which is a huge part of the divorce process is coming to that acceptance. So, what do you feel like
Yeah.
is some other aspects of beauty that's come from your divorce?
So I think one thing that it made me stop and kind of pause and evaluate was my daughter, was, you know, what does this look like potentially in the long run for her, like as
Mm.
far as the effect that it has
Mhm.
on her? And so, not just this divorce, but like what might be there generationally? You know what I mean?
Mhm. Oh,
Um,
absolutely.
what might, yeah, what might be the thing that kind of sticks on her? So, just for a while in my own time before I even approached her, um, it was okay. Let's just look at um, some things that we hope to stop with ourselves and doesn't continue on with our kids. So,
Mhm.
I came to her with different topics. We had an opportunity to sit down and me tell her, you know, how my role has been and where I feel like I have maybe not stepped completely up to the
Mm.
plate.
Mhm.
Um, that's including relationships,
Mhm.
and the fact that she's not gotten to see the relationship be a whole, see it through, see the
Mhm.
longevity in that, the caring aspects that are there, every part of it that she should see and get to experience.
Mhm.
So there were apologies given.
Mhm.
There were true letters written and read to each other. Uh, you know, there was forgiveness, talking
Mhm.
about forgiveness, talking about
Mhm.
just various topics with it. And so it's been continuous efforts that we have been doing, just her and I, where those things, I just don't want her to stick on her as she continues to grow and now develop into her adult life, so that
Mhm.
when it's time for her to, choose a partner or somebody that she's been dating, and she's starting to question, is this something real? Is this something, potentially lifelong? She's kind of worked through these things, worked through this, worked through that, to know what her own boundaries are, what she
Mhm.
desires, what
Mhm.
she, her worth.
Mhm.
So, I think it's allowed even more so our relationship to transpire in this new
Mhm.
way that it didn't exist before.
Mhm.
And and it's hard. I'm going to
Mhm.
say that it's
Mhm.
hard work. And I had to explain to her, it's going to feel like I'm tugging and pulling on you in areas you're not going to like. I'm like, but I promise you, your 30, 40-year-old self will thank
Mhm.
your 18-year-old self that you did this
Mhm.
work now. So,
Mhm.
coming through my own process, um, it's been eye opening and helpful. Um, it's just another part of being able to use this as my testimony.
Mm.
It's even that for my child.
Yeah. That's awesome. There are so many beautiful things there that you said, but you
Yeah.
are very intentionally using this as creating a divorce legacy that is going to, like you said, be passed on for many generations, and that in and of
Right.
itself is beautiful. But not only that, but just the ripple effect that divorce can have, and if we don't
Hmm.
intentionally take the time to heal and to have these conversations and actually say, "I'm sorry," to our children, like, that is not easy to
Right.
do, right? And
It's not.
no. One of the big things that you mentioned was just taking ownership, and I think that
Hmm.
is so vital to both parties that are in the divorce situation, is to own it, because you come into it,
Yeah.
marriage is 2 coming together as 1, and
Yes.
both parties play that role, and so when we don't take the ownership and we just blame and we just put it onto the other person, that is not a healthy way to approach relationships, divorce, and then the healing process after. So, good job to you for,
Right.
like, what you're doing. It
Oh,
just is
thank you.
such a very healthy way of approaching healing from divorce, and then making sure that your
Yeah.
daughter is also learning with you in this process of how to have those
Right.
boundaries and have healthy relationships, and take ownership for our own actions. I'm just, like,
Yeah.
so impressed.
Absolutely. Oh, well, thanks. And I
Yeah.
think, like you're saying, the biggest thing that's a part of it is just that ownership. That,
Mhm.
it's that self accountability. That looking in the mirror, that
Mm.
man in the mirror.
Mhm.
That that was probably another part of that forgiveness. Me saying to me, okay, you have to own your part of this.
Mhm.
You have to acknowledge it, learn from it. You weren't perfect in all of this.
Mhm.
So it's that ownership that was kind of part of the game changing part for
Right.
me, to just really see this differently.
Yes, absolutely. And then you're able to have grace and compassion for other people. So there's
Right.
another ripple effect that you get it now, and your ideas that
Absolutely.
right? Like, your ideas of what you might have had before about divorcees has drastically changed. And that kind of leads me to my next question. Like, what advice would you have for somebody that's considering going through divorce or just starting the process?
Yeah. Um, I think the first thing is to um, self assess yourself. Like, first of all, are you okay? Like, are your situation, like, what you're in, has it been damaging in many ways? Has it brought you to a level of you don't know who you are? Like,
Mhm.
is this the end all be all, or is there potentially a way to maybe work through some things? Um, I believe that separation is for reconciliation.
Mhm.
And if you can take a moment to separate and where you can both be in agreement to understand this isn't separate to go separate ways, but this is to separate, to have this little path in between, but yet we're both going to be intentional in what we do in this time to reconcile what we have, to see how we can grow it back to being good, whether that be counseling together and individually, whether that be figuring out, how can we just maybe one night a week we are sitting down, we're talking about things, maybe a mediator with us, just how can we work in this space right here to try to come back together to be better. But if it does lead to divorce being the end, decision, then I just suggest, first pray. Pray about it, and receive guidance. Tap into, like you said, your tribe, those that can offer you maybe some steps that will be productive and steps that will not lead you to, and I want to make sure I say it right, steps that won't lead you to being like, I can't do this. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, if you know this is the way that you have to go, then surround yourself with people that can help you take those steps to do what you need to do to get there. And really listen to within. It's easy for people on the outside to say, well, this is what you need to do. And if I were you, you need to do this. No, you need to do this. You're crazy for doing this. But what does within tell you? If there's kids involved, we know that brings on a whole another level of how things have to play out. So it's just being mindful of self, being mindful of kids, and even being mindful of the other person that's involved as well.
Right. Absolutely. A lot of people want to get emotional justice in the court system when they're going through divorce, and that's just not the place that they're going to receive it. And playing dirty just makes it worse. You really have to do that outside of the divorce process on your own.
Yeah.
I love what you're saying about the separation part, which I think people skip, that can be so meaningful and a time for reconciliation. I feel like people tend to look at it more as this is the next step to, like, before we're just going straight to divorce, and don't take that time to be intentional and have their separate individual counselors and also a marriage counselor. I feel like that is vital to doing that and giving it enough time. It's not a light switch. It's not a light switch moment that's going to happen really quickly. You have to give it sufficient time to be able to, for both parties to process, because we're all individual and we approach our journeys in different ways with our different personalities and what we've brought to the table because of our past. And so you have to allow enough space for both individuals to evaluate what they need to and then come together to work on it. So I really appreciate what you said about that separation to reconcile.
Yeah.
What is the biggest piece of... Oh, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, it can be a very, game-changing time. That's for sure.
Absolutely. What is the biggest piece of advice through your whole journey, through the divorce process, through the recovery, and now years later for you? What's the biggest piece of advice that you would give somebody that is going through the process?
Probably the biggest thing is don't lose hope. Don't lose faith. Understand that it is okay to start over again. Again, I personally, I didn't want divorce. I didn't want to lead to that, but that's where it led. And I think a lot of people end up there. That's not, one party or the other. Just that's not what we want to do. But it's not the end all be all.
Right.
It's not what begins to define you. Like, you're not such and such the divorce lady or such and such the divorced man. Like, that's not the definition of you. But I just encourage to remember that life is still happening. We still have the opportunity, yet this right here will feel heavy. It will feel, like I'm just over, like nothing has meaning, but yet you still have meaning as an individual. There are still things to wake up and be grateful for, to have gratitude for. There are still reasons for you to be around and be you. Learn from this. Learn from the things, maybe some of the things you would hear your partner say, or maybe just kind of some of the things that kind of stuck out while going through this process, and check yourself on it. Right. Evaluate yourself. Do that self-evaluation to say, okay, is this really a part of me and I didn't know? Like, or how can I be better at this? Or what can I do differently? I kind of feel like those are kind of some of the things that fall in with forgiving yourself too. You know what I mean? But I just encourage to remember that it is okay to start over again. Redefine who you are, reinvent who you are, be creative with this new you.
Yeah.
And love you. Love yourself.
Absolutely. Like, taking care of yourself holistically during the divorce process is huge. Have there been practices that you've found? You mentioned going to the scripture, but any other practices that you found for self-care and self-love during your divorce process that were super helpful?
So I picked up meditation, just having that quiet time, and and I mean, like early in the morning, getting up and just having that time for myself to just be in the quietness, in the stillness. And then I love, to be outside when it's not a billion degrees. So
hopefully those days are over, right?
Yeah. Right. But yeah, just kind of getting out and walking around in nature, just hearing the sounds and just being out and about. And so, just kind of found a few little things that were, just kind of self-satisfying, I guess you can say, that just allowed me to have peace for a little bit in moments. So, and thankfully those have stuck. Like, those are things that I, still continue to do and try to make sure that I do in my day.
Yeah. Awesome. We have to take those little breaks and give us those little moments of sanctuary with ourselves and with our spirit to keep us going. And I think that can get lost sometimes in the chaos of divorce because we're just scrambling to figure out what does this new life look like. So it's very, very important to take some time to do that, even if it's just a 5-minute breathing exercise.
Absolutely. Yes.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your story with us. And I think you have some great thoughts and advice for our listeners today. And I'm just looking forward to watching you flourish and see where God is taking you next.
Well, thank you. I'm glad to be a small part, and I appreciate you so much for having me on. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you, listeners, for tuning in. And until next time, continue to go forward with braveness. Talk to you next time. Bye. For more information on services or divorce resources provided by The Divorce Life, you can follow me on Facebook or Instagram, or find us at www.thedivorcelife.com. Thank you for tuning in and listening, and a big thanks to my producer, Jazz, at the Possibilities Podcast Center.